Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast, and this is the Curiosity Shop, the ZeldaEngine.net video mailbag. You want to come and see my collection of Zelda questions? Lywanda asks, what is your favorite overworld? Mine is probably like a toss-up between the Minish Cap and the two Oracle games. I would throw in A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening because they're similar, but A Link to the Past is just kind of a little more dull than those ones. And Link's Awakening, it just drives me crazy how you have to constantly switch equipment to just navigate screens because of the blocks and stuff. But I think that the Oracle games and the Minish Cap had the same sort of overworld, which is that, you know, untamed wilderness, and they were great overworlds, and I really liked them. Be sure to tell me your favorite overworlds in the comments. Skitchin asks, in the entire Zelda series, which side quest did you find the most difficult the first time around? This always comes back to haunt me, but for me, it was actually the trade sequence in Ocarina of Time, because the entire time I played through the game, and for years later, I didn't even know that there was a trade sequence. I didn't know what the Big Goron sword was, or, you know, and I found out years later when I first joined Zelda Dungeon, actually. It was hilarious and kind of embarrassing, but yeah. Other than that, I've never really beaten any of the game-long side quests, like the Gold Skull Tools in Ocarina of Time, or the Poe Souls in Twilight Princess. And I've had trouble with others, like the Goron side quest and the Minish Cap, but that's the big one for me, because I never figured it out at all. Be sure to tell me which ones you guys had the most trouble with in the comments. Silver Rupee asks, you said you didn't want to see a Majora's Mask remake, so would that mean you're against the idea of seeing something like the Oracles or the Minish Cap come to the 3DS Virtual Console? That's a bit of a misunderstanding I think a lot of people had with my video. I'm not against ports or re-releases, which is what you're talking about. Virtual Console means re-releases for the most part. What I'm talking about is specifically remakes. Now, there's a fine line between them. I mean, a re-release has to be altered to be put on another console to work on its hardware, and often they might add in a couple of little extra things or change a thing or two here or there, but it's pretty much the same game, whereas in a remake, you kind of alter the game more heavily. Ocarina of Time 3D is kind of, you know, which one it counts as is a little unclear, and it's a little bit of a fine line to begin with. But most people call it a remake, and that's kind of what I was going with. I'll go into this more in a follow-up video that I intend to do this Saturday to my last non-mailbag video, which was about Operation Moonfall. I'll go into a little more there, but I'm not against ports and re-releases. Snowlink asks, do you think Nintendo should remake the CDI games? No, not really. Particularly because the CDI games weren't even, like, made or really, well, they were endorsed, like, barely by Nintendo. But Nintendo didn't have any real involvement, and it's really pretty debatable whether there even are Zelda games at all, even though they have Zelda characters. So no, since they're not really main Zelda games, they shouldn't be remade. That's a silly idea. I wonder what's for dinner, asks, most Zelda games have an instrument. Will Skyward Sword have one too? If so, what? Yeah, they've confirmed Skyward Sword will have an instrument. It's the harp that Zelda has, and also it's basically the same as Sheik's from Ocarina of Time. And supposedly it's going to be rhythm-based, where you like strum the harp with the Wiimote in tune to a rhythm, but that's about all we know about it. We know it'll be used to get a certain important item, and that's all they've really told us. DCMA asks, do you think the sprint feature in Skyward Sword is pointless? I don't know, do you think we should continue rolling everywhere to get there quickly? I don't think it's useless. I don't know what kind of question that is necessarily, but, I mean, it's a common feature in video games. You have the ability to run to actually move quickly, and I think it's a basic idea. It's better than the rolling, and I just think it's a good idea. Chucker173 asks, do you think Skyward Sword will feature Dark Link and maybe even his origin? No, I don't, because technically Dark Link doesn't have an origin, or at least not a static one. Each Dark Link is essentially a different character or creature or manifestation. There's no consistency between the Dark Links. The only Dark Link who would seem to maybe kind of have serious plot relevance is the one in Adventure of Link, which was Dark Link's first appearance, but other than that, they're just like creatures you fight, or illusions, or spells, or something like that. There's nothing to do an origin story on. Oracle of Time asks, a lot of people think that the whale scene in both the E3 and the Comic-Con Skyward Sword trailer is Jabu-Jabu. Though I know that Skyward Sword is a prequel to Ocarina of Time, I still find it hard to believe that Jabu-Jabu would be flying through the sky, so I thought that maybe the whale scene in the two trailers might be the Windfish. What are your thoughts on the subject? Well, I think it's Lord Jabu-Jabu because of a number of reasons I won't go into since that's not the question, but as for it being the Windfish, I think that's just borderline impossible. Because the Windfish is, first of all, never really seen to be associated with the goddesses, or a goddess, or anything like that, and clearly Girahim states that this whale is serving the goddess. Whoever that goddess is, I guess. And also, the Windfish was really strictly Link's Awakening thing, and the only time he was ever mentioned again was in a cameo appearance of his song in Majora's Mask. Other than that, you know, he's an element of Link's Awakening. Link's Awakening has not really been seriously, like, connected to the rest of the games. It's really a standalone tale with standalone elements, and I really am certain that the Windfish is just as standalone. Kirby Winks asks, the Fairy Queen from the Wind Waker and Phi share a kind of resemblance. Do you think they could be related in some way? They could be or they could not be. It's pretty unclear, but one thing is, I noticed that resemblance too. Actually, way back when it was still called Zelda Wii, not Skyward Sword, and they had the original artwork that was still in Twilight Princess's style, and I saw Phi, and I was like, everyone was saying that she looks like the Master Sword in a human form, and I'm like, what? That's stupid! And apparently I was wrong, but I still think that was kind of a rash conclusion, but the first thing I thought when I saw her is, wow, she looks like the Fairy Queen from the Wind Waker in Twilight Princess's style, and she still kind of does look like that, although I guess it's a little diminished. So, you know what? I'll have to see. It might be just a resemblance, or it might be significantly important. We'll find out, though. That One True Gamer, you know which gamer, asks, with the new Zelda title Skyward Sword coming soon, the demo automatically shows the main villain in the game. So I was wondering, is this a brand new villain, or does this guy have any mention in or connection to any other Zelda games? Lord Girahim has not been confirmed to be the main villain, and in fact, the fact that they've sort of vaguely confirmed that he might be, that he works with a group, and he's not the only guy in the group, implies he very well might not be. And the idea that they've shown us the main villain right off the bat, when there's the other villains in the game, it makes it kind of doubtful to me that he is the main villain. That said, he's not he's not mentioned in other games, at least to my knowledge, unless he's supposed to be some character I'm not aware of. But the tribe thing I just mentioned, he's with a group, and my own theories on the subject, which I've covered in other videos and articles, is that he is a member of the Dark Tribe and or the Sheikah, which means that his organization has probably been, if that's true, has been referenced throughout the Zelda series, but he himself has not. Full Metal asks, Ganondorf has been appearing less in recent Zelda games and being replaced by new villains. It is good to see a new antagonist every once in a while, but it is starting to become a pattern. Do you think Ganon is suddenly being ruled out of the Zelda equation? Not at all, because really, Ganondorf has been in pretty much all of the games in the main series. I mean, I can't think of any immediate exception, really, except for Skyward Sword, which is an origin story, so the exclusion of primary elements so we can see their origins kind of makes sense. The only games that I can think of right off the top of my head that have villains other than Ganon really are side games. The exception, I guess, being Zelda 2, which just followed up after Ganon's death and had his followers attacking you. But all the other games that are, even Majora's Mask, are side games, and so they have side villains. There's no reason, since it's a side game, to not go crazy and experiment with elements that are outside of the norm for the series. But with the main games, they pretty much always have Ganon, even in Twilight Princess, where it was kind of thrown in at the end kind of randomly. So I don't think there's any threat of it at all. I think the only thing that gives that illusion is the fact that there are more side games. There really kind of weren't before. Steven asks, how can Link hold stuff like the Hero Shield, Gilded Sword, and Mirror Shield at his age in Majora's Mask? How is that possible? Because he has, you know, hands? That whole age, you know, you're too young to use this equipment thing in Ocarina of Time was pretty much just a gameplay quirk. It's nothing to take seriously. DarkWiz428 asks, what would you say if Nintendo released a Zelda game that was more futuristic, kind of like the newer Final Fantasy games? Examples including having vehicles and more advanced weapons. Well, you know, I've talked about this before, and my opinion may have changed slightly. The point is that Zelda is a fantasy title, and some of the Final Fantasy games, I think, start to get into the science fiction territory, although they're still pretty much fantasy titles. But Zelda has another element in that it's pretty much a whimsical fantasy. It's the fairy tale. You're the hero going to save the princess. That said, technology is not contrary to fantasy, and it's not contrary to whimsical fantasy, but certain ways, and even common ways that it is done or used or implemented, are contrary to that. Because you notice in a lot of futuristic settings, it gets kind of gritty, and it's kind of serious, and I think it detracts from that, you know, childlike whimsy. That said, I don't think Zelda should ever be modern day, and I don't think it should ever be like space travel, spaceships, and laser guns futuristic, but there are elements of technology, and they already are implementing these, that should be implemented in the game, or could be, as it's appropriate, as it feels right for the game. And that's really the key thing. Does it feel right? And it's going to be pretty obvious when it doesn't. Alright guys, that's it for this time. Be sure to send your questions to the contact page or email address in the description, and I'll see you guys later. Most Zelda games have an instrument. Will Skyward...